you know you're in trouble when you're a Labor Prime Minister and the unions are coming to you saying, change course or you're toast. Union leaders have warned Anthony Albanese he needs to come up with a bold change of direction or he risks losing, and I quote, the public argument next year, which I think is another way of saying you're headed for being a one-term wonder. Union boss Sally McManus told the Sydney Morning Herald, people are all hurting, and this is not just a small issue. It's large sections of the population. It can't be overlooked. It's the number 1, 2 and 3 issues. In other words, cost of living. Now, that warning comes as Labor backbenchers are making private appointments to meet with Jim Chalmers, seeking advice on what they should say to voters when they return to their electorates at Christmas. Front of mind, of course, is the last Newspoll showing that Labor's primary vote is sitting at just 31%. That's the lowest in a decade. There was some good news for the government today, though, or good news as good news goes for Labor. Usually their good news goes something like things aren't quite as bad as we thought they'd be. That's true on energy prices, and it's been true today with inflation. The inflation number is slightly lower than was expected. So it's bad, but not that bad. Here's the Treasurer.
Now, this was a substantial moderation and it was a much better outcome than the market expected. On today's measure, inflation was higher under those opposite than it is in the numbers that we have received today.
That's a good thing. Order. It's heading in the right direction. The measures that we've put in place are having an impact. It's not moving as quickly as we would like, but it does make a difference.
Caleb, how much do you read into unions coming to the government and starting to give them advice? It's like everyone's giving the government advice now. Peter Dutton's giving them advice, the High Court are giving them advice, and now union leaders anonymously are saying, hey, you need to make some changes.
I think you just said anonymously. I think the word is ominously. But anyway, they will leave that to one side. But the fact the unions are going to Albo and saying you need to focus on cost of living is important because, of course, the unions are the paymasters of the Liberal Party. They donate all the money that goes into their coffers. Did I say the Liberal Party? Here we go.
See, I noticed that, but I just let it fly because I'm far more gracious.
You shouldn't let it fly because we strive for perfection here on the Late Debate. So they pour all this money into the Labor Party, both through the unions themselves and then, of course, the industry superannuation funds, which are controlled by the unions and have shed loads of money that they give to the ALP. The unions still control branches. They have major say over who gets pre-selected and who goes into the caucus, etc., etc. So for the unions to start intervening and saying to the PM, you need to start doing something here, is something Albo needs to take notice of. Because, I mean, really, if you're a worker, a member of the union, you're more likely than anyone else to be hit by the cost of living crisis. And if that makes you start thinking, gee, I don't know about this Albo bloke, not only is that a threat to the ALP, it's a threat to the union movement as well.
Oh, 100%. I think many people read this today and were like, oh, they care about the cost of living. They care about their mates staying in power because if you're a union, you'd much rather prefer to have your mates in power. Life's better as a union if you've got a Labor government to play with. And so that's all I saw in this, being like, you better win the next election, mate, because they've got plenty riding on it.
I'm not sure how great the union's advice is. I mean, they're advising Albanese universal free childcare. They're advising him speed up the renewable transformation. I'm not sure any of that is going to help the inflation problem.
No, probably not. And how good was Chalmers today? So, you know, the numbers were worse under the previous government than they are now. I mean, we've just had, 13 interest rate rises in a row. Most of them have happened under this government. That's why inflation is starting to come down. That is a lever that has been pulled by the RBA, not by the federal government. The federal government itself has done very little to address inflation. They haven't cut their spending. They've got a surplus sitting there that they could eat up with such things as tax cuts, well, they won't do that either. The government can hardly sit around crowing, oh, how good it is, 4.9%, and we thought it was going to be higher, and the other bastards did it worse. Mate, you have done literally nothing. And what they've got to be careful of, if they start crowing about this and thinking, well, everything's on track, we're good here, they then fall into the trap of thinking, well, maybe we don't have that much to worry about.
Right.
And that's the worst thing they could do to themselves.
I suppose that the good thing for the government, Liz, is that inflation number means it's unlikely there'll be another rise when the board meets
I wouldn't put anything
next
on
month.
that.
I mean, they wouldn't want that before Christmas. That would just be doomsday.
I know, but Philip Lowe 2.0 has not flagged that whatsoever. Not that we would take any of her flags literally anyway, after the real Philip Lowe told everyone, now's a good time to buy a house. Your mortgage will be safe and steady for a great many months. And here we are, the rest is history.